do is wipe down all of my utensils, including my mixing bowl, with white vinegar and clean paper towels. And now I'm going to wipe down my rubber spatula. Go ahead and pop my paddle on my mixer. And if you're using a hand mixer, you would do the same exact thing. Just wipe down the beaters that you plug into your mixer, hand mixer. Even if they're metal, wipe them down with white vinegar. Basically anything that's going to come into contact with your royal icing, wipe it down with white vinegar. I also have a sifter here that I'm going to use to sift my powdered sugar. However, this is designated only for this use, so it never comes into contact with grease, so I don't need to wipe this down. Now the next thing you want to do is take a cup, any cup, it doesn't have to be a measuring cup. So now I am going to measure out 5 tablespoons of meringue powder into this cup. So take a big scoop, level it off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 5 tablespoons of meringue powder to every 2 pounds of powdered sugar. So if you wanted to do a double batch, you would do 10 tablespoons of meringue powder to 4 pounds of powdered sugar, which I already have my 2 pounds of powdered sugar weighed out. Okay, now to my 5 tablespoons of meringue powder, I am going to add half a cup of water. So I've already got 1/4 cup of water in there. I'm just going to pour another 1/4 cup in there. And I'm going to give that a stir to get all that powder, that meringue powder, saturated. I find that if you use warm water, it eliminates a lot of the air bubbles in your royal icing later on when you're decorating cookies. So I'm just going to give this a good stir, and then I'm going to set this aside so it can dissolve. Now we're going to sift our 2 pounds of powdered sugar into our mixing bowl. If you're using a 2-pound bag of powdered sugar, you can just dump about half of it into the sifter or whatever you're using. This is actually like a strainer. Okay, and then I just give it a couple taps, and I'm just going to take my spatula, which again I've already cleaned with white vinegar, and I am going to kind of smush the powdered sugar through the mesh. And this part's pretty boring, but we do this with every single batch of royal icing so that we don't end up with a bunch of clumps. You can also do this. You can hold the sifter at an angle and tap it, or you can use one of those sifters where you crank the handle, whatever you prefer. This is how I do it. I like that this big round thing sits on the bowl and I can fit quite a bit of powdered sugar in it at a time. I picked it up at Dollar Tree, I think, for $1. I had a different one, but it broke. You just want to make sure it has a pretty fine mesh on it. So I'm not going to make you guys watch this entire painful process. I'll come back once I have this all sifted. 2 pounds of powdered sugar sifted into my mixing bowl. I've got my 5 tablespoons of meringue powder dissolved into a 1/2 cup of warm water. And then I've got my imitation clear vanilla extract. I like to use clear so it doesn't discolor the icing. And then I've got some white gel food coloring here. From here we basically just toss it all together. So the first thing I'm going to do is give this one final stir. I'm going to dump this whole cup of meringue powder liquid into the mixing bowl, and then I'm going to go fill this up with more warm water because you do have to add some additional water. So let's pop this pop this on the mixer, pull it forward, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a tablespoon handy for my clear vanilla extract. I'm just going to turn my mixer on low speed. It's going to throw some powdered sugar at you. And as that's starting to mix, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of clear vanilla extract, about 15 drops of the white food coloring, and then I have my additional warm water here to add if needed. I'm going to turn my mixer up a little. Now I'm going to stop it and scrape down the sides of my mixing bowl. Even though this paddle has a scraper on it, you still have to get up here where it doesn't reach. I'm just going to knock that sugar down into the bowl. Give this a scrape. Now, as you can see, this is very stiff, so it's actually hard to get off the spatula. And if that's what you want, if that's the texture or consistency you're going for, you are almost finished. Basically just want to mix it until it looks fluffy. It's also important to mention you don't want to over mix your royal icing because it will, you can go too far in the other direction and it'll become grainy and icky. So this is what I like to call a glue consistency royal icing. This is what you would use for an edible glue if you were building a gingerbread house or something like that. This is nice and stiff. As you can see, the peak here doesn't fall over at all. It's very stiff. I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of water to this just to smooth it out a little bit because I am going to be piping with it. If you needed a flood consistency icing to ice sugar cookies with, you would just continue to add water until this is a fluid consistency. Okay, just gonna scrape this down, check and see if it is the consistency I want. I'm gonna pop that back on, let it mix for a few more seconds, and then it's all finished. Alright guys, and that is it. In the next part, I'm going to show you how to thin this stiff royal icing to a flood consistency to decorate sugar cookies with.